Lights, camera, people like me. You didn't know that?
Hey, 4 minutes, you ready? Remember, if you want to sit like that, that's cool. Just always remember to have this nearby and then just kind of point it at yourself so that you know we're good, okay?
All right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's 4 minutes. All right. How you doing? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello. Thanks for coming. Something to show your little girls.
Hmm?
Something to show your little girls.
They're watching live.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm trying not to do this
Yeah.
or any of this. Smile. Smile.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, we're starting. Here we go. Welcome to Three Thoughts On. Thank you, everybody who's here. We're always so grateful that you take time away from your busy lives to be here with us. Thank you, Juan Santos and Reese Lynn, for always making the magic work of the video and the transmission and the YouTube live streaming. Today we have a special guest here, Mr. Wayne Alleyne. Wayne, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm nervous.
Yeah, we know. Wayne, we have a great conversation. I'm actually excited to converse about this topic because I know this is a topic that you're very passionate about. So, but before we get into that, can you give us a little bit of background? Who's Wayne, and how did you end up here in Lake Nona doing what you love to do?
All right, so I'm originally from St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands. I left the island to study engineering. I wanted to study engineering, civil engineering to be specific. So I went to Savannah State, was part of a Direct Connect program with Georgia Tech. Got hired by Jacobs Engineering. Jacobs Engineering had a program going on here in Orlando, Florida. So I've lived here my entire career. So I've lived here for 17 years. So I've lived in Lake Nona for 17 years. Stayed in some apartments off of Narcoossee Road. Kind of observed that was my first example of a valet trash system, where there's a company that would come pick up trash door to door and then dump it on site at the on-site compactor, right? Paid attention to the process. I didn't think it was lucrative because, it was guys in beat up trucks. Bought a home, a condo to be specific, started a family. While our single family home was being constructed, we lived in a apartment complex, again, short term, that did not have a valet trash system in place. I realized people don't like to touch trash, right? They would have trash bags on top of their car roof. They would, put it on their trunk, ask me to dump it because I had a truck. And, I started to pay attention to the process. I guess more so from a regulations perspective, right? Because I realized that the compactor was always overflowing. So if it's overflowing, one would assume that it's not working per intention, right? So now you're gonna have increased maintenance, you're gonna have issues. So I started looking into regulations and working with the apartment. Well, my intent was to work with the apartment complex to make them aware of better waste management practices that they could put in place to make the community, more beautiful. So me being a engineer, I knew nothing about business. Started taking classes through SBA, and then I started my company. That was 4 years ago.
Right on. So, civil engineer with a passion for should we say sustainability?
Yes.
Right. So sustainability, at least in my experience, means different things to different people. And I think that maybe that's part of the problem that we face today, because it seems like people go in different directions. When we talk about people, talking about individuals, talking about corporations, talking about communities, local government, state government, federal government, it seems like everybody has their own definition of what sustainability means. According to Wayne, what is sustainability? And let's break that down.
All right, so sustainability pretty much covers 3 pillars, right? There's the environmental, there's the social/community, and then there's economic. Sustainability to me means something that's self-sustaining, right? You and I speak often about the pyramid or the Trinity, right? And it has different meanings. I think you like it because it means me, myself, and I. I've heard people talk about past, present, future. Sustainability is just that too, right? Us taking the tools from the past generation, using in the current generation, and keeping it sustainable for the next generation, right? So when we leave the earth, we're leaving it better, either the same or better than we met it. So a sustainable community would be a planned community, similar to one we live in, where you're able to plan in advance and have sustainable tools and processes in place, right? And each community will look different. You need to figure out for your community, what's your niche. I know here in Lake Nona we have Laureate Park, to be specific, we have a community garden, right? And there's been talks about expanding on that. That might be our niche. I'm not sure, right? But I'm just going based on example from what I've seen. I know Costa Rica is big on farming and agriculture. Brazil is big on pig farming, right? And using the manure to help for biofuel and biogas. Different regions, different cities have things that they are great at.
So that's interesting. So correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm reading wrong what you just said. So there's elements of the sustainable model that we get to enjoy right away. Like you said, a planned community. If we do the work, we build the community, we work with the developers, we work with the city, we work with the county, municipalities, and so forth, we get to enjoy that. But there's an element of having a sustainable process that we don't get to enjoy because we're passing it on to the next generation. It's been my experience that, that makes things difficult because we tend to be a me now kind of society, right? Do you see it that way? Does that make things a little bit challenging for people to do or engage in a process that right up front, or from a funding perspective, right, that it's not going to be reaping benefits right away? Or are most people okay with that part of the model?
I think people want to do the right thing. I think we're so busy in day-to-day life that we don't take the time to actually make sustainability a focus, right, or a priority. A lot of times we wait till it's mandated, all right, if you don't recycle, you're gonna get a fine, before we get up and try to educate ourselves on things that actually would better us, right? As not just a community, but humans.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So let me ask you, you mentioned the 3 pillars, and you started talking about trash, right? So trash obviously is a business, right? But it is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, keep me honest here, but it seems to be that what we define as trash is not necessarily what you would define as trash. In fact, if I'm correct, a lot of what I would define as trash, you will find that a lot of that could be reused. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, so, based on statistics, right, close to about 50% of what you dump daily in your household is food waste that could be reused, right? Another 27, close to about 30% of what you dump can also be recycled, right? Plastics, metal, cardboard, paper, right? So probably truly 20% of what you dump is true trash that cannot be reused or repurposed.
About
and
20%.
I don't think most people know that, right? Yeah.
So how do we do better? I mean, so this starts at home, right? I mean, of course, we depend on our elected officials. We depend on the community developers. We depend on, the federal government. Like you said, there's got to be standards. Case in point, example, Hurricane Andrew, right? Back in the early 90s. Those of you who remember, I was here back then. There was a building code that was present at the time, but the building code had to be completely redone after people saw what happened in Homestead, right? And is there a corollary there when it comes to recycling? Because you said, people don't necessarily, some people don't know what to do. Some people recycle, things that probably don't need to be recycled, right? And some people throw away things that probably could be recycled, right? So there seems to be like maybe we need a little bit more education, or maybe the information is out there, we just don't know where it is. And maybe for those who know where the information is, maybe they don't know exactly where to take things to. Can you elaborate a little bit on that from your point of view?
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of a gap too, right? Like my kids, that generation, they're very educated. Like if you ask them, they know. But our generation, like I said, I think we try, but we just don't. There's a lack of education, right? So I typically go to, like, I review our city or county or state regulations, right? Like if you go on the City of Orlando website, Orange County, you'll find exactly what you can recycle and where, right? So typically, like plastic, numbers 1 through 5 are what they accept here in Orange County at the landfills. Paint, I think they accept that too, but they accept that at 2 different locations, either the landfill here on the east side, I forgot the road, or the one on the west side off of, I think, no, the east side is Young Pine, and then the dump site on the west side of Orlando. I think both sites accept paint as well. So yeah, our local sites will provide you all that information. I also review, sustainable. I think the website is sustainablecities.com or sustainablenews.com, and that's where I get most of my information of what's recyclable, what's not.
So where are the gaps right now? So we have a community here. Lake Nona is fairly new, right? Is fairly modern when compared to some cities or some other special districts. But there are still gaps, right? I mean, this is not picking on anything. This is just we will always need to be looking to improve. Where are some of those gaps, and what can we do about them? I mean, some of the gaps have to do with us as individuals. Some of the gaps have to do with processes that need to be in place to collect and deliver. And I know that you're involved in some of the new projects that are coming along. So it's like if we can start looking at like, where are we right now? Where do we want to be, say, in 5 years? And what are some of the steps that are going to get us there?
Yeah, so Lake Nona, for a fact, right? We're advanced, right? Because majority of the people who live here are educated. If I had to give a percentage, I'll say over 50% of the people here have a bachelor's degree or higher, right? We have a local podcast, right, where you can come and listen and get information. All of that is part of a sustainable community. Gap, yeah, I would say education, right? A lot of people ask me, so Wayne, what can we recycle? I think the biggest misconception of recyclable item would be a pizza box, right? A pizza box can be recycled, but if it doesn't have grease, if it's filled with grease, right? Now it's contaminated, right? So there's good intent to recycle, but now you've contaminated the load once it gets to the landfill. And a couple pizza boxes may not contaminate the entire load, but if the load is contaminated past a percentage, now you've lost the load.
And it becomes trash.
And it becomes trash.
Okay, well I did not know that.
Yeah.
Are there any other examples like that of things that could contaminate a load?
Yeah, bottle caps by themselves, right? So bottle caps with the bottles, right? Bottles that are, like I said, plastic between number 1 and 5, or glass, in entirety can be used for recycle, but by itself, it's not recyclable.
Is that right? The cap by itself is not.
Correct.
It has to be attached to the bottle it came from.
Yeah.
Even if the cap is plastic and the bottle is glass. All right. You writing this down? Okay. So let's go. I want to go back to the beginning of what you said because you talked about the three pillars. And I'd like you to expand a little bit more on the three pillars. So if you can remind your definition, because I want to get to that. At some point, I'm going to try to, whether it's comfortable or not, push you a little bit in that direction of what does Wayne want to see, when it comes to sustainability, right? Because we have to have a target, right? So you mentioned three pillars. You mention them again for the audience and those who are watching online, and then expand a little bit more on them.
The three pillars were environmental, I said community, social, and then economic.
Mm-hmm. So the environment is basically, how do we use the environment? Does that include how do we build? Whether we build up versus building across, what kind of materials we use, is that where it all goes? In addition to how we dispose of what we consume?
Yeah, reduction of fossil fuels is one, right? Reducing the carbon footprint. Like you're saying, building materials. All that would be incorporated in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about the economic side?
I don't know a whole lot about that
That's
area.
okay. That's okay. Just high level.
High level. So again, that would go back to, like, say you're building, right? A facility. Do we use reusable pavers, right? That have a green footprint. That's going to cost $100 a square foot? Or do we go with a brand new green paver that's going to cost $2,000 a square foot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where
Okay.
The economic sustainability comes in
Mm-hmm.
place.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the community side, which we've touched a little bit on. I want to zoom into that side because I myself learned from you, just like I'm learning right now, some of these misconceptions about what to do with the cap and the pizza box. But it is very popular to have composters at home right now. And it turns out that it's not as easy as people think. Let's talk about, because it turns out that there are people out there, I was one of them, who thought we were doing the right thing and maybe we're not doing the right thing because of what we're putting in there, where we're putting it, and then where we're taking it and what we're doing with it. Can you expand on that, the whole composting model? Because that's something that we should be able to do, on a household basis. Of course, the community can do it at, the community basis, which there are some things, coming up, in the future here. So talk a little bit about that, please.
So I keep looking this way because Commissioner Gray is here. But yeah, if you don't have a composter and you want one, you can go on the Cedar County website and you can request one, right? I'm not sure if they actually deliver it or you have to go and pick it up, but it's simple, right? It's easy to assemble. I would say composting is like, it's like cooking, right? Like a soup. There's a chemistry to it, right? Typically, like your seasonings would be like your eggshells, your banana peels. Those are, typical products that you use with your compost. Temperature has a lot to do with it, right? You don't want to exceed, the temperature of exactly what you're trying to compost. You don't want to get too hot or not be hot enough. And then, of course, timing, right? Depending on your type of what you're composting and your compost itself, your equipment, it may be a week, could be 30 days, it may be 60 days. So all of that you need to, make sure you learn and find out about.
Is that a function of additives or is just time? I mean, are there things that you can do to take the 60 days into 7 with specific compounds that accelerate that process?
Correct.
That are safe to be at home?
Correct.
And around animals? Okay. All right, so another note. So you can actually request one of these things, and either it gets delivered or you have to go pick it up. Then what happens? So you're composting. You know, I see a lot of people that do composting for themselves because they're using it to enrich their soil, right? But others are basically composting to dispose. So walk me through that process. Like, what do we need to learn from that, and how do we go about it?
Yeah, so you could use it in your yard, right? Vegetable garden. You can grow, plants, vegetables, fruits with this new enriched organic soil, right, that you've created, right? The disposal process is, simple. You can bag it, dispose it.
All right. What else can the community do in order to say that we have a sustainable community? We talked about composting. We talked about recycling. I know recently, you did an international trip, to Denmark to learn some things that may be coming up, in the future here. But that's from a corporate side, but it's also things that we can do. Because as you know, I mean, part of what I do with this podcast is not just to inform and to get people over here that can share information, but also to challenge the community, to challenge the people who live here, to challenge us to do better, our developers to do better, our officials to do better. We all have to do our part, right? So, like you said, there was a development process over here that was done. Lake Nona was built from the top up in a way that makes it easier for us to do certain things when compared to other planned communities, right? But you and I know that we can even though we have that advantage, we're still not doing what we can do. So what I'd like you to take a little bit of time and talk about, okay, what are some of the things we could be doing better in your view? I mean, don't be afraid to challenge people. This is good. And then talk about your trip to Denmark and some of the things that we can look forward to seeing in the near future or midterm.
So before I answer that, right, some of the stuff that I'm seeing too that's upcoming, right, is the development of beep, right? So the first thing that comes to my mind is transportation, right? Alternative methods, right? So, right now beep has this, this pilot, I'm gonna call it a pilot study, where it's running up and down Tavistock, right, from Canvas to Boxy to the hospitals to USTA. That's reducing, right, bars on the road. That's one way of, reducing the use of fossil fuels. What else? There's this vertiport that's coming soon, right?
Soon, hopefully sooner than soon.
Yeah. From my understanding, I guess there's some land set aside behind the 7-Eleven near 528. That's supposed to be the potential location for that vertiport. That's also going to reduce our fossil fuel consumption once people are using it. That's another alternative method of transportation. So there are a lot of things here in Lake Nona that are in place already that they, in preparation for the future. Things we could do better that I've seen during, Denmark is probably the #1 happiest place to live in the world, right? So they're
5 years in a row.
yeah, they're they're killing it.
Yep.
The cars there, I guess, if you drive an electric car, it's tax free. So they don't pay taxes on electric vehicles, right? And that's one way that the government gets, promotes electric vehicles purchase. Also, they have 24/7 transit systems, right? Bus systems that run, and they run off of biofuel. So that would be another way I foresee Orlando progressing in the future, right? Getting away from using the modern gas and go in more of the direction of biofuel or even electric, whatever is more economically sustainable.
Well, I mean, that's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough one because the use of public transportation is something that local and state governments can definitely invest on, but it's also a cultural thing. We all know cities where it's expected to use the public transportation, right? And to not, you don't have to think about it. You just go use the buses or the subways or whatever. So that is something where when the local authorities or the investment groups, private or public, come in and offer those opportunities, we then have to use them, right? And at first, they may not be as sexy as my, whatever car I drive, right? But we have to take that step, right? So I look forward to that time where things are available that we can use, because it's going to require an effort, a collective effort, to take advantage of those. So then we can start seeing that impact, so that we can see what we're going to be leaving, like you said earlier, to the future generations, right? So what are some of the projects that are coming up over here?
All right, so there's a company out of Denmark called Bigadan, right? Because the company here will be called Orlando Bigadan. They're getting ready to construct and commission a biofuel plant near our community, right? And that's going to be to me a game changer for Central Florida, right? Because for people that compost, for businesses that want to compost, hotels, restaurant, this plant will be able to receive compost in mass, right? Mass volumes, hundreds of tons, which is going to be great, right? That's definitely going to be a big factor for us here in a sustainable direction.
Is that a first of a kind here, or are there smaller versions of that already available?
Nothing of Yeah, this is going to be the first of
First
a
one.
kind. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about biofuels for the audience. What do you mean when you say biofuel?
So it could be biofuel is liquid or gas, right? It's a fuel. It's more sustainable. It's natural, right? Because it's coming from compost, right, or food waste that is of an octane that can move a vehicle, right? So vehicles can move off of this fuel, right?
So that will be for the case of the new vehicles that are biofuel, that can accept a biofuel grade type of gasoline or whatever. So that is the model. There is the plant, but actually the model is more commercial than for you and I initially, right? Because there's a ton of commercial equipment that actually uses biofuel, right? And that probably will be the first target, right? But over time, you can see that could expand into other areas, and it comes solely from compostable materials, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So where do you see us going? Where should we go with all this?
You being here in Lake Nona or the world?
How about both?
Where do I see us going? I need to elaborate on that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I have dreams of being able to, like you said, go outside, be able to see, the transportation that is available. I love for us to be able to do a little bit better on recycling. You read all the time that a lot of the recycling ends up in the trash because of whether it's contamination or mislabeling or misclassified, right? I love for us to be able to do better at that. You mentioned the community garden. We do have one here in Laureate Park, but that needs to grow, right? And more people need to use it, right? And more people need to contribute to it, right?
So I think I live across from it. It
Yeah.
is it one thing. It's not underused.
That's good.
I think we need more. Like my neighbors, like they grow potatoes, broccoli. I mean anything you can think of, fruits. You have to fight for a location, and it's not underused.
So how does it work? What's the model? I mean, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's pretty much ran by the HOA, and we have someone in the neighborhood that kind of leads it, right? And you go in there and you try to get a spot, right? And then you kind of rotate spots as well, right?
Okay, so you're growing your own thing.
Correct.
Okay. And I guess if you have too much, then you can share with others. Okay. How big is it?
In terms
Roughly?
of feet, so 40 by 40 is it's not huge.
Okay, well,
yeah.
but I mean, it's good enough. You know, it's a good start. This company you mentioned, Bigadan, it's a very large corporation. They're very big in Europe, right? And they're doing all kinds of different things, you know, specifically in this biofuel of reusing compostable material, organic material into making reusable fuel. But that's not all there is. I mean, there's many other opportunities in order to contribute. Can you think of any other things that's outside of biofuel that will contribute to the sustainability movement that we're trying to push?
Better waste management practices. You know, you touched on you like to see more recycling. Here, food waste is still an option, right? It's not mandatory. Not that it should be mandatory, but again, we don't really have a location where you can dump it in mass, right? Like you have a couple of local companies. You have like Old Town Compost, you know, and companies like that where you can call them and they'll collect it from, you know, similar to your door-to-door service like the city and the county offers, right? So that is a current option too, right? Like if you wanted to get rid of your food waste, you could call the Old Town Compost and they'll come and they'll, you know, pick it up from your house for you. But yeah, you know, better waste management practices for sure is going to help with our, you know, sustainability efforts.
So for your group, you know, Nona Enviro Group, what is it that you can tell people as far as what you do now and what you'll be doing in the future to do your part for the community?
So like I said, you know, I really started my business, right, to help businesses make better waste management decisions, right? To make it more of a priority, because people really don't pay attention to it, right? It's not urgent, so just, you know, helping them to be more aware of regulations, you know, state, local policies. You know, that might be me coming in and doing an audit, you know, periodically. Also, I am in the valet trash business, right? So we pick up trash, recycle, and food waste.
What's the advantage? I mean, I'm curious about this, and we haven't talked about this, and if you have, I forgot, but you know, you say, you know, you're helping businesses, you know, make better decisions when it comes to their waste. A lot of those businesses are probably restaurants, right? Because restaurants, you know, they produce a lot of waste. Are there incentives in place for restaurants to actually process their waste better? And if not, you know, probably something that we should work on with our officials, right?
Yeah. Currently, I don't think there is much incentives. That is something that I am working on. Um,
No, well,
but
that's good. That's
yeah,
good. I mean, because that restaurants probably are, on a daily basis, the number one producers of trash that could be reused fairly easily in places like the upcoming plant that Big Adan is gonna be building over here, right? So that creating that level of awareness, creating that level of education, and then also in addition to the incentives, right,
yeah.
for them to be able to do that, so that it becomes now more of the norm as opposed to a one-off.
And that is one of the conversations I have had with Big Adan as well. Like they have some ideas of policies that we're going to be able to work on collectively as an incentive to clients.
Okay. Well, you mentioned your little girls, that they know what to do. Can you expand on that? Like, what have you indoctrinated them on? Because it's obviously you were the one who did that, right?
Yeah, I was surprised.
Because they're watching right now, so you know.
I was surprised. So, I go, typically on Earth Day, I'll go to the school, and talk about sustainability and recycling, and it's like they're telling me more than I know, right? Which is surprising, right? Like they're on it.
That's wonderful, though. So they're actually keeping you in line.
They're.
Daddy, you can't throw that out.
I know.
That's recyclable. All right. No, that's single-use plastic. Is that something that you practice at home? I mean, do you reduce what you buy? Whether it's paper, plastic, single-use stuff.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't consider myself to be an extremist, but I don't buy paper products, right? So I don't buy paper plates, plastic utensils. I still use toilet paper and paper towels.
Well, I think we all have to.
But,
I hope you do.
yeah. But yeah, I try to not buy those products, right?
I would like to open. I know I was asked last night at the Chamber of Commerce event to make sure that we open up for questions, because there's a lot of your friends here.
I see.
And I want to put you in the spot. We don't have a microphone right now, so if you can ask a question, then I'll repeat it so that folks online can actually hear it. This is the time to do it. Any questions for Wayne or comments? Where are you? You were all. Yes. So the question is, as far as incentives for restaurants, what are they, or what could they be?
I can't elaborate too much on it, but what I will say is we're working on an incentive where it's not going to cost the restaurants or any of the potential clients more money.
So it could be as easy as some sort of tax break, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, it can be something that they have to make, a significant investment, because then you have to talk about returning them that investment and so forth, and it could put a kink in their economic model, right? But there's probably some combination of tax breaks and other types of incentives, in order for that to be appealing to a large restaurant as well as to a small. I think that's probably one of the things where we sometimes struggle is when incentives are developed that work really well for a certain type of business, but it doesn't work very well for, the smaller, or it work well for the small one, but it doesn't work as well for the large one. So something to think about, something to write down there as you work with the team of private and public officials that you're working on. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, look at that. We got all kinds of questions. Ladies first, please. So let me summarize that, and is there more value when it comes to sustainability if us as individuals get with the program and actually start doing our part collectively versus the large businesses or, medium, small, large businesses do their part? Which one gives us the biggest bang for the buck?
That's a good question.
She knows.
I know.
She's been thinking about this since yesterday.
So this is what I think.
Wayne's World.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I think it starts with the individual, right? Because we make the community. We work, some of us are business owners, some of us work in these restaurants. So if you as the individual have the knowledge and you have these policies and practices in place, when you go to work, you're going to educate your employees and friends of, hey, this is how we should be doing it, etc. So I think it starts with the individuals.
Oh, I tend to agree with you. I mean, we've had that conversation, you and I. We choose to live here in Lake Nona. We choose to work here in Lake Nona. We do everything here in Lake Nona. Tavistock has done a great job at laying out this planned community, but they're not going to create the community. We've seen that, we know that. That's not a dig, that's just a reality. They're a developer of land. They develop the land. It is up to us to make the community and to actually get involved and to actually make a difference on a daily basis. So I think in the long term, I would agree with you. Midterm and long term, it's probably a bigger bang for the buck,
Yeah.
if we all do our small part. We had another question here, Mark.
Good.
So the question is when it comes to biofuel, how do you see the technology helping, now and in the future, that process of not only the creation of the biofuel, but all the steps that have to be taken before that to separate what comes into that facility so that the process actually is lower in price and it can produce the maximum quantity of fuel that waste can produce. And is AI part of that ecosystem?
I definitely see AI being part of the system. In terms of the product, I'm going to say that, using this biofuel plant that's coming as an example, right? The first few months to a year is going to be more of a trial, right? I mean, like they have they have years of experience with this, but they're on different soil, they're in a different environment. It's going to be a trial to get that product, right? And once they get to the sweet spot of what their finesse product is, then you can figure out, all right, well, we don't need this, we don't need that. At that time, definitely technology, AI, as well as chemists, right? Mm-hmm. And people that are in the business of, biofuel and plant and processing will help, right? Knowledge, education, technology will all be major factors in that.
That's actually a good point, and I didn't think about it until you just said so, that the actual details of the process will, by default, look different from community to community because of what the community produces as waste. What we produce as waste here in Lake Nona in Orlando could be distinctly different than what gets produced in Arizona, right? Or in Wisconsin, right? So it is a function of what the society consumes, what the society throws away, what's going to determine what can be done on the other side, right? So that's a good question. You had a question over here?
All right, so we've been talking about Lake Nona, we're talking about Bigelow, we're talking about responsible community development. Let's talk about Sunbridge. As we grow as a community, Tavistock is going to develop Sunbridge. How do we grow responsibly, sustainably, and we're going to produce more waste as we grow 3 times the size of Lake Nona? How does that impact our community, and how do we do it responsibly in conjunction with Bigelow?
So the question is in the advent of, again, for people online, in advent of the community Sunbridge, for those people who don't know, we have a community here that is being planned, is being built already. In fact, it's about 3 times the size of Lake Nona. And those of you who don't know the size of Lake Nona, it's about 80% of what Manhattan is, roughly, right? So 3 times that, actually, a lot more waste, right? So what are some of the things that need to be in place? What are some of the things that we need to be thinking about as we're building that community so that it's not 3 times waste, but 3 times opportunity to create something with that waste?
I know Sunbridge already has some practices in place. I need to do more research as to find out all the details of it. But I know for sure they have community gardens that are larger than what we have here, right? So that was one lessons learned from here, right? That, all right, to you and Glenn's point, it is going to be 3 times the size of here. So we need to make sure we have gardens for the population. Like we touched on before, I think the more people being educated and actually using composters or using the food waste, removal system, hiring an Old Town compost or similar, is going to help with the reduction of waste too, right? Again, being more educated or educating yourself on items that can actually be recycled, right? That I know for a fact when I dump this, it is going to be recycled when it makes it to the landfill. Just all those measures are going to help.
And they've also done a few things with solar, right? They're doing quite a bit of work at Sunbridge with solar. In fact, in the beginning, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that all the homes were coming with solar power, and you actually had to pay to take it off, right? Which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
So they already started with some new ideas as the lessons learned from this community over here. Any other questions from the crowd? Wayne has been the person that's gotten the most questions so far this year on this podcast.
I realized that. I wasn't going to say anything.
And he's drawn the biggest crowd so far too, so kudos to that. Any other questions? Okay, well, to those of you online, thank you for being here. Wayne, thank you for your time. I know you were nervous. You're still probably nervous. It's okay. You did great. Thank you for being here. It was a much pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to take a little bit of a break. We